All righty. Hope everybody had a good weekend. Let's see. When I put these things on our YouTube channel, the chat doesn't always, well, it doesn't ever show up, and I don't know exactly why, other than it just doesn't get recorded. But so far, nobody's really complained too much about that. Today, what I was hoping to do is talk about the next module, talk about inclusion, and then talk also about the service learning and artist research projects that are coming up, as well as one assignment that you probably noticed called Tools of Artistic Critique, and I'll explain that as well. So what I would like to do is do all that other stuff first, and then end with the discussion on inclusion, if that's all right with you guys. Several people mentioned to me that the Wire module was not up, it wasn't open, and I thought I had done that, so I'm really grateful that you guys pointed that out to me. Thank you very much. That was very nice. Now, one thing that everybody should be seeing is these show up on the attendance in the attendance module, ideally within about 12 hours or so, depending on how fast the internet is wherever I am. And that's so that everybody has access to these, and you don't get graded differently for attending live or watching the attendance later. It really doesn't matter points wise. Let's see, now I'm going to go to our module, and I'm gonna show you, I'm gonna do a screen share and show you what the next module is for everybody. Okay, here we go. This next one is called Defining Volumetric Form with Line. Now, the module numbers, most of them are in order, not all of them are, and they are kind of wonky. And what I should be doing is taking the numbers off altogether. I kind of like the wonkiness of it. This module is all about using wire to generate form. And there's some good examples and some bad examples and some ideas that we really don't want to be doing. The wire gives you an opportunity to create a form with a sketch line in a similar way as you would to like a contour drawing. So that is why it's so important for everybody to get their kits. About 5 days ago, I think there were only like 10 kits that have been picked up. And then a couple days ago, that had grown to about 14 or 15. So, which is excellent. Everybody needs to have their kits so that they have access to the wire in the kit. And what I would recommend when you are doing this, when you are working on it, grab a pair of gloves that you don't particularly care about, like cheap ones from the Dollar Tree or something like that. And also wear some eye protection because the wire will be flopping around. Now these pictures here, 4 out of the 5 pictures are not what you're supposed to be doing. They're just kind of introducing you to the idea of using wire. Like this hands one, this is way, way, way too flat. And also this one, the baby clothing, is way, way, way too flat. If we go down here, these I think are really fascinating. And you can kind of see how the person is developing in this with the deer eating, or it looks like the deer might be eating. The artist kind of used the wire to condense the form on the two forepaws or forehooves and the head, and then they kind of expanded the wire out gradually from those points out to here until it just fades into nothingness. And I think that is really visually striking, but none of you have enough wire to do that. This one I think is really interesting because this person used the wire almost as a weaving, like a textile type material. And you can see that it looks really interesting. And I think the wire on this is, it looks to me like it's like foam cable or something like that, where it's just lots of different colors of wire. And you can see how they kind of wove it together, made some really fascinating shapes with it. We're not doing this either. But this, the bovine, this is a really good introduction to the kind of thing that we're going to be doing. And can you guys see how the form of the cow is made with the wire? They're using the wire not to trace everything exactly, but it's almost like they're using the wire as a scribble line. Can you guys see that? Okay. And that's the kind of thing that we want to do. And there's a couple of things that are important as well. It matters more to me than the wire is structurally sound and interesting, then it matters whether or not you can recognize it when you get done. I have had people do shoes, I've had people do animals. It doesn't really matter. Whatever you do, the form needs to look like you are doing something on purpose, and it needs to be sturdy. Some of the least successful ones that I've seen have been where the person just made a coil, because that is incredibly unstable. Some of the more successful ones, well, let's see if we can find some examples. Okay, here's the quiz. This is the artist list. Not all of these artists did exactly what we're doing, but all of them address the ideas of creating a form using a wire as kind of a 3D sketch or a three-dimensional sketch.
Yeah, I started looking at some of those videos and I found the circus one to be super interesting because like his wire sculptures actually are meant to move. I found that really cool.
Yeah, Alexander Calder did some amazing things. One of the things he's most well known for is his pop art mobiles. But I thought everything in there, you look at the little sculptures and they're not designed to be completely realistic. They're designed more to kind of engage the audience into um, like childhood observation or childlike observation. They're entertaining. Like I like the one where he blows the balloon up. I thought that was kind of fun. And then the horses that go around the ring. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And his wire sculptures seem to be more along the lines of um, creating a graphic element that was meant to kind of entertain and maybe uh, pastiche like circus figures a little bit. I thought that was really kind of interesting. Hold on just a second. All right. Okay. Now I think everybody can see this tab that I have open. Um, these are some examples I want to show you of what people in the class have done with the amount of wire that you have. Now, there are some things that are consistent with these images that I want you to look out for. And some of them are more successful than others. Like this one, remember I said just doing a coil is not a really good idea. I think this could have been a little bit more successful. This it looks to me kind of like a horse type structure. What I think is a little bit frustrating to me is that the person used a coil to kind of generate the volume of the leg and the neck and the head, and didn't on the legs. It isn't very stabilized, but on the head, I think that the head structure is really nicely developed. And I'm going to try to articulate why I think that. On the legs, you just see a coil wrapped around a loop of wire that's down to the toe and then is folded back. But there's nothing to stabilize that loop except at the very end of this limb. And that makes it so that it is interesting, but it's not very structurally sound. However, with the head, you can see that there are these anchor points throughout the head that they anchored that coil to the wire that they had folded back and forth to kind of generate the stable structure of the head. And so that's why I think that this is a little bit more successful. You look on the back, the loops of wire, see these little dark areas right here? The loops of wire are attached to the coil that makes the spine. And that's why I think this area and the head are more successful. If we look at, this is a Popeye figure, and what is that? AT-AT, one of the walkers from Star Wars. This, I think the legs are a lot more successful than the body. Can anybody respond as to why that might be?
I feel like the legs look like they have like more weight to them, and then the head looks a little bit like too empty, like there's nothing really holding it together, or it doesn't really have bones, I guess.
Yeah, and I think you are articulating exactly what I'm looking for, because the legs, they look sturdy, they look strong. What I think would make the head part better is if something was attached on the sides, something was done on the sides and the bottom and everything to give it a little bit of form, because this artist has established a certain level of craft, of workmanship on the legs, where we know that they're stable and we know that they're strong and we can read them really well. And then they've kind of stepped away from that up here. And so that's why I think, Diana, you're exactly right. That's exactly what I'm thinking as well. Now, is there anything wrong with either of these two? The pair of shoes and the teddy bear, the really disturbing teddy bear. I don't think there's anything wrong at all with these two. I think they're beautifully done. Now, this is really kind of open right here, and we can look right here. This is really open. The difference is that this person has found areas that are structurally important and bound them together. Now, admittedly, you don't have an awful lot of wire. They did the best that they could with the wire that they had, but I love the fact that they've kind of spread that tying down texture around a little bit. So we do have some open areas, but this pair of shoes feel like they are consistently pretty sturdy. Now, notice on here on the teddy bear, those arms have those coil type things that I was complaining about. But what's different with this teddy bear is that there are a lot of areas where the artist has kind of tied and looped those coils into the armature of the arm, so that this is a lot more stable structure overall. And I love the kind of mix of open area and tightness in this head. We see how the wire right around the top of the head to the sides or at the center, as we get to the muzzle right here in the bear. What's interesting to me is how they've been able to, all these little wire, all these little knot bits are not necessary to hold it together, but the person did that to kind of mimic sewing and kind of the frayed sewing that you'd see in an old teddy bear. And I think it's really successful. And then they have just these little loops for ears, but I think that those are really nicely done. It makes for a good balance. Now, if you guys do need more wire, you can always go to, like, Harbor Freight is an excellent source, and get some more if you'd like. What I've seen in this class before is people undertake this project, they start getting into it more and more, and they'll build up the skeleton of their structure with the black wire, and then they'll find another color, for example, and kind of flesh it out with the second color. I've also seen people, when they get done, wrap these with a little bit of string to give it a little bit of texture and color too, and that can look really interesting. What I have seen that is not as successful is when people have taken this idea and all they've done is make a silhouette with the wire. And they've done a couple silhouettes of like plants or leaves and then call that good. So, we look at this fish, and the fish is not completely fleshed out. It isn't fully realized as a fish, but all the important elements are there, and we can read it as a fish. And I think it feels like it is complete. It is open, but it feels like it's complete because we have a lot of this texture going, visual texture going on. We have areas where we can see that the wire is wrapped around. We can tell that it's sturdy. And I think that the fish becomes a lot more successful than this horse. And I think the fish is also, this one right here, I think started off really interesting. What I would like to have seen with this to make it even more successful is more going on the bird cage itself, because the bird cage, it looks very fascinating with this area right here, with that horizontal set of rings. And this edge around here looks really, really interesting. The bird is fascinating. This part right here reminds me of Alexander Calder's circus, but the rest of it just really doesn't seem to go as far. And I think that that's one of the challenges that you have with this assignment. When you have the wire, figure out how you're going to use the wire best. Because what you'll probably need to do is start working on the most important elements of your sculpture, and then as you run out of wire, determine what is most important. Or you could, go and grab another coil of wire from somewhere. Let's see. I think it's called IPS. Up there in Orem, there's the. Do you guys know where Kmart used to be years ago? It's north of Mobetta's. In that area up there in Orem. I want to say about 800 south, I think. Is that right? No, that's not right. Okay, it's there's Center Street in Orem, and then north of that, at about the 400 North Light, is where I believe the KFC is, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and right there is I think it's the IPS store. That's a really good source for stuff too, for super, super, super cheap materials. The national average for this class is expected layout for students for 165 bucks. And Jason and I have worked as hard as we possibly can. I say we, it is almost entirely Jason. He has kept this down so that almost all your expense is just the measly little lab fee. So it's so much cheaper than the national average. And that's the national average for expenditure on just supplies. And the national average for the textbook is going to be about 100 bucks. And so, bringing our textbooks down to 35 or less, and our supplies to just the cost of materials in your kit, I think we're doing pretty good. But if you wanted more materials, I would recommend Harbor Freight, the IPS store, and maybe even Walmart. IFA, sometimes you can find a good deal on wire. But I think that's a good way to approach this, is to consider what are the most important elements that you want to express. And you need really hard to make this three-dimensional. So making silhouettes isn't going to do it. But if that's the only way that you can undertake this, what I would do is figure out a shape you're going to do a silhouette, and then make 10 of them. And then set them all on the same axis so that they're slightly off from each other. And that way you'll make like a 3D shape with these silhouettes at different angles vertically. And I think if you do something like that, I think that would be an okay way to address this. You know those little models that you find at some toy stores where you can make a dinosaur. You snap out the wood pieces and it looks like just flat areas of bone. If you think of the wire like that to do the silhouettes, I think putting it together in a three-dimensional form like that could work. I have to mention that because every semester there's a couple people that have a really hard time wrapping their head around this project, and they end up doing just like a silhouette of a leaf. And that's really not going to help, I think, to address this. So if you guys have questions about it or anything, just email me. There, every week somebody is emailing me questions, and I've been able to answer them. I really appreciate you guys when you ask questions, because I'm also teaching like a very first semester type class this semester, and the questions that I'm getting from them are, it's obvious that they do not bother reading anything. And you guys are asking me questions that are actually intelligent. So I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Let's see. I wanted to show you something else as well. And this is going to tie in to, I'm sorry, my, for whatever reason, I have an alarm going off that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Because I know that I'm in a class, so why would I leave an alarm to remind me about the class in the middle of the class? But anyway, I want to share something with you, and this is going to lead us into the next little element that I wanted to talk about. All right. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That was the wrong one. Here we go. We're going to share this one. There we go. Okay. As you get done with the projects, I have these discussion boards, and you've been pretty good about putting them on. 3 of the discussion boards, you're going to have to interact with stuff. The rest of them, I just want you to put your an image of the work that you've done up on the message board. And this is so that everybody else in the class can see what kind of thing you've done. There are going to be a couple assignments later on where a big part of the assignment is posting everything you've done on the discussion board. Again, it's so people can see your work. On these, the reason for most of these to post is for, let's see, I'm going to stop sharing that really quick, is that everybody can has an opportunity to choose something to do an artistic critique on. And I'm going to show you that assignment really quick here. And it's something to be thinking about now, even though it's not due for another 3 months. So let me show you that really quick here. All right, here we go. The name of this module is Applying the Tools of Artistic Critique. And you can see that this is not due until April 19th. And I'm thinking that this one right here, this discussion one, I'll probably take off, because this right here will as we do them, I'll switch this out so that you can, it'll link to our current class. Right now, this one that says critiques from class is actually linked to last semester's class, so you can see examples of what other people have done for their artistic critique. And then this one, the 2 artistic critiques, I'm just going to remove that so you guys don't have to do that. I'm going to take that off the assignment so that you don't have to worry about it at all. All right. Now, let me show you what these 2 artistic critiques are. Remember at the very beginning, we talked about the 4 tools of artistic critique. Does anybody remember what those 4 tools are?
So with description, analysis, I know I'm skipping one, and then like conclusions, or like whether or not it was a success or failure.
Yeah, that is really good. You've got 75% there. The 4 tools are designed to help you as you articulate what you see. And what's interesting to me is, as we are able to better describe what we see, as we have a better command over vocabulary, as we interact with what we see, it also helps us to think better about what we see. But the 4 tools, the first one is description. Second one is analysis. The third one is interpretation or interpret. And the fourth one is evaluation. The first one, you're just talking about how the art presents itself. How it looks, how tall it is, what kind of style it's in, what colors, what materials. The second one, analysis, you're talking about the how of the art. The first is the what, the second is the how. And this is you're kind of extrapolating how the artist put stuff together. How did they make it? How did they put the materials together? What kind of level of craftsmanship did they use as they were assembling it? And the third one, interpretation. This is when you're guessing even more. You're pretending that you're interacting with the artist, and you're asking yourself questions about why they did it. What is their worldview? What's the context of it? What kind of message do you think the artist is trying to communicate? And then the last one is evaluate, where you're determining, is the artwork valuable? Is it successful? Now, this video describing what you see, Henry Moore reclining figure, I want everybody to watch that. I'd like you to watch it at least once a week if you can. But this is two people talking about Henry Moore's famous reclining figure sculpture and applying the tools of artistic critique. What you'll need to do, and everybody in the class will need to do this, is look at those discussion boards that have the photos of everybody's artwork in there, and find something that you like so you can pick it, and you're going to apply the 4 tools of artistic critique to that image. And the way that you will turn this in is you're going to do one on your own work, pretending that you've never seen it before. And the second one, you're going to do one on somebody else's work. These are going to be about 3 minutes long is all. And I want you to go to the video that playlist that shows what other people have done, and look for good examples and bad examples. But what you're going to be doing is looking at an example of somebody's artwork and applying those 4 tools to it. And what this can look like is, let me see if I'm going to pull up Henry Moore's reclining figure here. All righty, here we go. All right, can everybody see this? This is Henry Moore's reclining figure. And whether I'm doing this for my own work or somebody else's, and remember, you're going to have to do one on somebody else's work and one on your own. It doesn't matter. If it's my own work, I'm going to pretend I've never seen it before, and I'm going to apply these tools, because I guarantee you will learn about how amazing your own work is if you set aside the fact that you are going to be your own worst critic. When you pretend that it's not your work, you find that you're able to actually see what you did and recognize what you did, instead of just belittling yourself. Like, all of us are artists. All of us have that tendency. We are really nasty to our own work. But what I would do, for example, if I'm filming this, is I am not going to ever film myself. All I'm going to do is have this image, and I can blow it up full size on my screen, set my phone up on a tripod, turn on record so that you only see that image, and then go through the 4 tools. And I will say something like, hello, my name is so-and-so. I'm doing a critique of one of my own works, or I'm doing a critique of somebody else's work. And this particular piece by Henry Moore is called Reclining Figure. And first I'm going to describe it. And then you describe it for about 45 seconds to a minute. Then you say the next step is analyze. And then you analyze it. This is how I think they did this. This is how I think they put this together. This is how these things are done. And then after I talk on that for 45 seconds to a minute, then I'm going to say the third step is interpret. So, this was made during this time. I think the artist is doing this. This is what I'm guessing that they're working on, but it feels to me like it could be talking about this. And then the fourth step is evaluation. I think overall this feels very successful. And that's what basically the steps are. Now, when you go to this assignment and look at the assignment directions, what you're going to notice is, like, you can't just pick any random sculpture. It has to be when you are critiquing somebody else's work, you need to pick something that has been posted in one of our class's discussion boards. So it needs to be a piece of art that has been done for one of the assignments from one other person in the class. And by the time we get close to the end of the semester, we're going to have over 100 pieces of art that you guys can pick from. And then when you do your own critique of your own work of art, it can be any of the pieces you've completed, and but it needs to be one of the pieces you specifically completed for this class this semester. All right. So how many critiques are you going to need to do to turn in? Avery or Paula or Abby? Any of you guys?
Is it 2 critiques we need to turn in, one for our own work and one for someone else's work?
Yes, precisely. Now, follow-up question to that, how long do they need to be?
3 to 5 minutes long.
3 to 5 minutes, that's it. No longer than that. The reason I say that, you think it'd be kind of dumb for me to say, please don't do it too long. 3 years ago, I had a student who did this for over 30 minutes in class. That is way, way, way too long. If you guys go over 10 minutes, it's an automatic fail. All right, so don't do that. But yes, you're exactly right. You're going to be doing 2 of these, one on somebody else's work, one on your own, and these need to be 3 to 5 minutes, and that's it. Then you're going to upload it, submit it, and send it to me. Or if you can't submit the file, put it on your own YouTube channel and send the link in so that I can put it on. I can send it out to everybody. I'd prefer to have you send me the file. That way I can put it on our YouTube channel, and then everybody can see it.
I do have a question. So for some of those like discussion boards where we're going to post our work, will we ever be posting like any work in progress type of photos?
If you want to, it might be kind of interesting. If one of them you want to share the different steps that you've done and post all those photos together, that might be really kind of interesting. But you don't need to. If you want to, you can. Let's see, and it's a minimal number of points just to give you a little bit of incentive to post. I think it might be kind of cool if people do want to do post an in progress photo in addition to the final piece photo, then I don't see any problem with giving you like an extra credit point or 2. I think that'd be kind of cool. Now, I did want to touch on, did that answer your question, Diana? Okay. I did want to touch on the research and service learning type of thing. I wanted to touch on that a little bit. You'll notice that there are 3 more assignments through the course of the term, and I wanted to give a little bit of clarification on what those are. It used to be that this kind of big project, you'd have to turn it all in at the end of the term, and we realized very quickly that that is really, really mean. So what I've done, each of us has split it up in different ways. For me, it's called Module 7, and then you have a point A, point B, point C, and point D. The point A is that initial opening salvo where everybody needs to do the artist list, but if you're doing and you declare art service learning or artist research, most people have done that. The couple of people that haven't declared yet, I haven't separated out the two assignments, and I'll explain that in just a second. You should notice that after you declared, if you're an artist research person, you are only going to be responsible for the artist research option from now on. And if you're a service learning person, you are only responsible for the service learning option. And you'll notice they are very different things, but they're going to be worth the same number of points in each of these modules. Then everybody does the work log where you talk about the time. Now, if you see in your list of assignments to do both the artist research option and the service learning option, what that means is I did not catch your declaration of which one of those you're doing. It doesn't mean you're required to do both. Just pick one of the options that you want to do. Let me know as soon as you enter it in, and then I will go through and you will suddenly lose. You'll suddenly no longer have or be responsible for those extra assignments. So this first one is artist selection and reflecting. Then if we scroll down here, we'll see 7B. This is where if you're doing artist research, you're going to be doing an annotated bibliography. If you're doing service learning, you'll notice that there's two different assignments. One is you're going to be walking through who can you work with, and the other one is you're going to be walking through what will your project look like. But after doing this for several years, like 99% of the time, these two assignments generate the same or require the same amount of workload of hours and time put in than this one assignment. And that's why this is 40 points and both of these are each 20 points apiece. And then we go down. This is that applying the tools of artistic critique. We go down and see 7.C right here. You'll see the same kind of thing. This is the PowerPoint presentation for artist research. And you'll see service learning where they present the project. So that's both of these represent about the same amount of work, and both of them again have the same point value. All right, and then we get all the way, and right here, let's see, this right here has a link to previous PowerPoint presentations on artist research. So that's what that is. And then as we go all the way down to 7D, the final thoughts, this is everybody's going to do a final little opinion paper and slash reflection on either artist research or service learning, whichever one they did, and the last work log. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? Okay, excellent. Now, I think that is most everything. So we talked about tools of artistic critique. We talked about the two artistic critiques that you need to do. We've talked about artist research slash service learning. And is anybody here doing the service learning project? I think, Paula, I believe you are. You said that you want to do service learning. Would you be, okay, would you be comfortable just talking a little bit about what kind of thing you're looking to do for your service learning?
I was thinking of working with this program that helps students from underrepresented backgrounds, just because I have worked in higher education. Just, I don't know, maybe make content for them or something like that. I have already talked to them about it just to see if they're open about it. And we're just kind of coming up with ideas now.
I think that sounds really interesting. And I think that is a terrific idea to do something. I think the most difficult thing will be there's so many different kinds of things that you can do. Narrowing it down to reflect your own background as an artist and your own skill set and life experience, I think is going to be the only problem that you might have. I mean, that sounds like it could be really spectacular. That sounds great. I like that idea. Yeah, please let me know how things go on, because that sounds like it'd be really great. And for the service learning, I've been going through everybody I'm sorry, not service learning, artist research. What is fun for me to see there is people talking about the 3 things that makes the artist that they want to research different from them. I really enjoyed that. It's always kind of entertaining to me when a young freshman lady will say that they're interested in Frank Gehry because he's an old man in his 70s. Yeah, he's very different from who they are. And I think it's kind of interesting that even though we see a lot of these people that are so dramatically different from us, there's a lot going on in their art that speaks to us, and we feel connected anyway. And I think that that's a really great segue into this being a diversity collaborator. And I wanted to talk about this a little bit. We touched on it last week. Do you remember when I was do you remember when I was talking a little bit about whose voice is most important in the art realm? Whose voice is important? Whose voice is necessary in producing art?
Literally anyone's. So anyone who's within the community, even outside of it.
Yeah, everybody's voice. And it's not just that the voice is important, it's absolutely vital. I don't think art can be honest or really mean much of anything if everybody's voice is not represented. Now, is having other people say their own thing in addition to you saying your own thing, there's like this knee-jerk reaction where we assume that that's like a threat almost to the capacity of our own voice being heard, but it's really not. Art, there's really no platform within honest art for there to be any sort of jealousy. Because one person is speaking their truth, it doesn't prevent anybody else from speaking their truth either. And people, since everybody is their own individual, nobody has to occlude or hide somebody else in order to be able to fully express their own selves. And I think that I like that because it's kind of an economy that we don't see very often. We assume, like with everything, if one person wants to expand, that means that implies there's limited space and somebody else has to shrink. And that simply is not true in the art realm. And so, and I hope you guys had a time to look at these videos as you were coming into this. It looks like 4 people have put material into the discussion. So I wanted to go through that. And if any of them are here, it would be great to hear from you. And if not, that's fine. I'll go through and just look at what they submitted. Oh, Diana, okay, you're here. This is great. Okay. For whatever reason, I totally spaced it. Even though I'm going to backtrack a little bit, and I'm sorry if it's confusing to everybody, but I'm going to backtrack just a second. I talked about applying application of tools of critique and doing artistic critique on your own piece and somebody else's piece. What is really important to remember about that is even though it is due April 12th, I think, something like that, if you do it before then, that's going to make it a lot easier on you at the end of the semester. And I will give extra credit to everybody who's able to do it before midterms. If you can get this done before everybody's back from spring break, I will give you extra credit. And specifically, I am talking about the tools of artistic critique application where you are critiquing your own work and the work of one other person in the class, or one other thing in the class. Whoever can do that and turn that in before March 15th, you will get extra credit. All right. So Sorry about the backtrack there. But anyway, okay. Diana, would you be willing to talk a little bit about what you turned in for part 1?
Yeah, totally. So for part 1, one piece of like artwork I chose for for the like first section, like the to divide section. I actually chose like an episode from one of the more popular like medical dramas, but it started in like 2004.
Right.
Yeah, so I guess it's kind of like period wise, like it's just like the joke was not hitting as someone who's like seeing it later on, but it still kind of caught me as like off guard and like I was kind of like, that's not correct. But basically to summarize all I wrote, one of the patients we had was like a stereotypical like immigrant kid who was my age, like 21. And he was like one of the people who was like, doing someone's roof or like doing yard work. And he got sick and his brother and like his whole family, like they're undocumented. And I feel like the show made a point of like making their house seem like really dirty. They did like the whole stereotypical Catholic thing. And then it's like the actors they chose did not even speak fluid Spanish. So that kind of rubbed me the wrong way.
Oh, so it wasn't just the portrayal in the show, it was everything from casting and set design that was just feeding into the stereotype as well. Oh, that is horrible.
Yeah, and it's also like in the first season. So I feel like maybe I should be a little forgiving because I guess, it was like less accepting. And it's like, I know it's like not that way, but it's like those kinds of stereotypes that still kind of like feed into like excluding a group of people.
Right.
And then for my second piece, I chose Judy Chicago's Dinner Table from like 1970s feminist art. So it's basically just like a whole thing like empowering women, and it's like a tribute to women of all different backgrounds. The only thing that they have together is like they all did something to uplift the women's movement even before it was like a thing.
Right. Well, and there is one other thing that ties them all together that I think is absolutely spectacular, and just proves how awesome, truly awesome Judy Chicago is. Notice that the cups are all identical, and that is the only thing on each place setting that is.
Mm-hmm.
And this cup, I think, is absolutely fantastic. Did you ever watch Da Vinci Code?
Yeah.
Well, the grail or the cup references a lot of different things, but specifically, it in movies like the Da Vinci Code, it represents a really ancient tradition that the divine bloodline is passed through the woman. And seeing that in every single place setting just adds even another layer of how awesome this is, because no two of these people come from the same background. Yeah, I think that's an excellent choice. Way to go. Now, looking at this, I really like this one. I lived in Alabama for a couple of years. And Abby, thank you very much, Diana, by the way. Abby, would you be able to talk a little bit about your choices?
Yeah, I can. This came to mind in thinking about art that divides in, how so much interest has been in removing culture because of heightened awareness of how sometimes art can represent history and heritage, but then also to other people it is divisive and painful. And so anyway, I just thought of sculptures like these down in the South that have kind of brought interest into the culture today.
Well, I think that this is a really good choice to illustrate that. That's excellent. And then on this, how is this unifying? What does this demonstrate?
to me, what stood out here is I felt like the Black Lives Matter piece of art painted on the road in such a public space mirrors unification, because it's in such an open public space that everybody sees and uses and comes together. So I also, as I said, it just seems to be such an interesting piece of art right in that community that promotes dialogue and is a good reminder for, positive change of equality.
Well, and I think it's fascinating too, because you can only read the message from above. And I think that promotes a really significant message in and of itself too.
That is true. That's a very good point. Yeah, that is interesting. You kind of need to step away from where you're at to really have a broader view of that. I like that.
Some of the things I'm reflecting on as I look through all these is, if you guys remember about, I know you're not going to remember, but remember hearing about this. In the mid-19th century, there was a tremendous amount of racism against Irish immigrants. And they were all, and I'm talking about in some areas they were really harsh against Irish immigrants. In other areas, they're really harsh against Italian immigrants. And what I thought was interesting about that is that the majority of people that were the nastiest were the people whose own families had immigrated just a generation earlier. And it's fascinating to me how the vitriol boils out, and there's really no excuse for it. I mean, there's no way to demonstrate that one group of people is evolutionarily superior to another, to the point where one needs to be completely excluded and the other one needs to be completely supported. I think that's a lot of that is baloney. But what's fascinating to me is that the groups of people that are most vocal about this, they're not demonstrating superiority at all. What they are demonstrating is incredible fear. And I think that's something that Martin Luther King was able to really demonstrate, that the racism that he was seeing, he was able to show or help people to understand that it came out of a place of devastating fear, which I think is really interesting. Now, this Isabel did something where she shows two different things. The first one and hers, like the first one and these other ones we've seen have been divisive. The second one has been unifying. And Isabel, her first one is unifying. And I think that this is really kind of interesting. And this, I think, has a lot to do with this as well, where the portrayal is something that forces you to kind of step back and look at it through a different perspective. And I really appreciate that, because if you get up close to these images, it's almost impossible to tell what they are. You have to step back. And I love that metaphor there. When we step back, we realize that there is so much more that unifies human beings than there is that can ever separate them. And it's usually the things that separate people. There's like one point that is used to divide. And it grows in awareness, and it grows in relative importance to people until that's the only thing that they can see. And that's the excuse they use to express their fear through hatred, which I think is really sad. And this, the example that she used about dividing was this Madonna portrayal, with elephant dung and cutouts. And it's interesting because whether or not the artist intended this, I don't know if you guys have read any of the fallout from this. There was an astonishing amount of just divisive reaction when this was first shown in an exhibit 1999. From the things that I read at the time that the artist said about their own work, I thought their intent was more along the lines of, and this is trying to remember from 25 years ago. I thought their intent was more along the lines of what, that the German nihilist, the philosopher who said God is dead and we're the ones who killed him.
Nietzsche?
Nietzsche, yes, thank you. Because when he said that was what inspired a revitalization of honest religious expression among aristocrats in Europe. It was a very small group, of course, but most people thought he was saying that, God is dead and that's it. There's no reason for hope. But he was actually trying to shock people into an awareness that because religion had been so politicized and had been an excuse for the dehumanization of colonized peoples, that in effect, people were trampling on the idea of God. And I thought that Chris Philly, I thought that that's what they were saying about their own work at the time. I don't remember. I could be projecting, but it was definitely a very divisive piece of art when it came out. I mean, very much so. They were incredibly angry people when they saw this, and there were death threats, countless death threats against the artist when it came out. So yeah, that is a really solid example of art being used as divisive. Now, Paula, would you be able to talk to or speak to the works that you used or that you chose?
Yes. The first one is basically Spanish paintings that their intention was to show who was new in Spain, but they also, like where you were put was based on the caste system that existed, and that caste system was racial, and it did acknowledge mixed race people. So the more Spanish you had in you, the higher you'd be in the system, and African and Indigenous would be lower in the system. So, and that would appear in how high or low you'd be in the paintings and where they were put up, I guess.
What time period are we talking?
I can't remember off the top of my head. But it was during, I do remember it was during colonization.
Okay, so
no,
we're probably
like,
talking 18th century,
yeah,
17th century, right around there. Okay.
yeah. So it was intended to cause division, but it did.
Okay.
I think further like pushed that like colorism, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then that's an excellent example of divisiveness. That's great. Now, could you talk about the unifying, the butterfly? Why you chose that?
Yes. So the butterflies they symbolize DACA recipients, which those are immigrants who were brought here like at a young age, like 1 year old before they could make any of their own decisions. And like this is the only place they've ever known. So the butterfly is a symbol of that immigration, since they immigrate to their home. And it is a public mural, so it was like a gift to those DACA recipients, and the public can see it as well. So it's kind of just to bring kind of an acceptance of them, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I think that's great. Let's see. What you just shown kind of reminded me of something, and I really like these kinds of things that you guys are bringing up. The Costa paintings reminded me of something very specific, and this reminds me of something else as well. I lived in Alabama, and and people were really excited about the uh, Civil War memorials, particularly the Caucasian population was really excited about it, and they were baffled that not everybody supported it. Um, believe it or not. But I also remember that there were several churches that had beautiful murals like this as well. And a lot of the times they would be in the same towns that had the very divisive statues. So I think that's really an interesting dichotomy, that some people choose to respond with negativity, and other people choose to respond with something positive. I think that's really interesting. But I wanted to share something with you. There were a series of paintings done um, tail end of the 18th century through the mid 19th century of indigenous American royalty. One of the the colonizing tools used is to dehumanize and disrespect indigenous populations of wherever the colonizers move in, whoever the colonizers are. And very early on, from the very outset, because Isabel and Ferdinand were uh, making a way for the forced uh, um, indoctrination of a new population of Christians, as well as uh, generating a slave population to increase their holdings, essentially. Uh, the the kings and queens, emperors, empresses, presidents, and prime ministers that were here in the Americas, their titles were removed and they were referred to as chieftains. And their countries, their nations, the empires were relegated to the simple term of tribe. The same thing was done with the colonization of so much of the continent of Africa. And it was a way of showing tremendous disrespect to the indigenous populations, because the fact that they were the executive heads of state was completely ignored. And it was ignored on purpose. With every other culture in the world, heads of state would meet each other as equals. That did not happen with the indigenous communities, the continents of Africa, Australia, or the Americas. The only exception was, I believe, with the Aztecs, and that was because they were sheerly terrifying. But in the early 1800s, there were a number of painters that were portraying the executive heads of state of indigenous populations in the same manner of royal portraiture as you would see in Europe at the time. And I think there's a whole series of absolutely beautiful paintings like this done. This is from 1840, but from 1780 to about 1850, and they're gorgeous. Then you get the whole idea of manifest destiny, and this changes to very quickly. We can see in political cartoons of the time, all of a sudden, the indigenous populations are being portrayed as stupid subhumans. And it's, the caricatures of features. I mean, you look at this individual that I'm showing you is a head of state. He's obviously a prince, but within 20 years, the same figure is being portrayed as a drunken lout or a cretin, and it's amazing how quickly the perception of everybody in the country shifted. The European colonists shifted, and it's devastating. But we see that over and over again, and a lot of it is just the perspective of people being used specifically to either undermine or support specific ways of viewing. And I think it's interesting. I love that earlier image. I was raised with 3 Navajo brothers and a Shoshone sister. And so when I was growing up, those are the kinds of images that I'm a lot more comfortable with and a lot more familiar with, because that's what I grew up with. And it wasn't until 7th grade when I found out that General Custer was supposed to be a hero. And I guess if a hero means you go after the population of women and children that are left behind after the men are trying to lead you away, then that makes you a hero. But that's for a completely different discussion. But it is really fascinating to me that right now we are at a place in history where this is like the first full generation that has been born and lived their entire adult lives in a post-colonial world. And they are confronted with dealing with helping their children understand what's going on, why they still haven't reclaimed their full identity, why they're still working on that. And that's not even true. That statement, I'm saying generally most colonial powers were, most of that stopped in the 50s and 60s, but a lot of that continued through the 70s. And then just last year, France gave up its last colony in the continent of Africa. So it's something that is very relevant. But what's exciting to me is to see that there's so many people who have decided not to be angry about it, but to be proactive and show their children who they are and help their kids grow to develop a proud awareness of identity. And I think that as artists, one of the things that we can do is support that. Whether or not we contribute directly is something else, but by with doing what you guys were just doing in that exercise and finding good examples of unification, being aware of the examples of divisiveness, I think it represents a significant mind shift from, like when I was in Alabama, people being completely baffled and totally clueless as to why anybody might be offended. Or like Diana, you were saying, the first season of House, the producers being so uncaring and so unresponsive. And it's really, that perspective is, at the time we were living through it, that perspective seemed matter of fact. And now we're startled that anybody could actually feel like they could get away with that. And I think that leads me to something else. As we have discussions like this, you can choose to be angry at people in the past if you'd like to, and that's completely up to you. But we talk about context, and context contributes a significant amount to the meaning of any situation. In the matter of communication, it's anywhere from 70 to 95% of communication is context. So I think before we judge each other or people in the past too harshly, we also need to evaluate them from the perspective of the context within which they lived. I want to say Barbara Toohey, but that name is not right. There was an art critic who talked about this in the 80s. And one of the phrases that she used was, a fish is not even aware of the water it swims in. And we need to be aware of the water we swim in. And of course, the water she's talking about is the atmosphere that we breathe in and move through, that is the culture that we're part of. And I think as the path to that perfect ideal place where all of us feel accepted, that path does not lie through holding people responsible for not being able to tell what they weren't ever aware of. But it does lie through looking at past examples and being aware of how awful those examples are in the context of today. Like I don't know, were any of you aware that in the mid 1800s, 20% of the Chinese population in California was slaughtered? It was the Chinese massacre in San Francisco. A policeman was killed by somebody who was a member of a gang, and it enraged everybody who could be enraged, who had a weapon, and they descended on Chinatown and just started indiscriminately hanging and shooting people until 20% of the Chinese American population was killed. But the impact was expanded so much through explosive news reports that Congress made it illegal for you to become a U.S. citizen if you had Chinese heritage in your body until World War II. You know, and that's an example of people acting out of fear, and it's horrible, it's terrible, but it's also something where we need to be aware of that kind of a situation and do whatever it takes to make sure something like that awful doesn't happen again, you know. And I think one thing that is so amazing about today that none of our ancestors ever had access to is things like the internet. You know, most of the information we get through social media is horrible because social media is designed specifically to feed your own confirmation bias. Most decisions regarding buying things, most purchase decisions are made through emotion. And I read an article last year where it was talking about how social media engines to show you material that they think that you want to see are actually specifically designed to get you into an emotional state so you're primed to buy something, which I think is absolutely terrible. But that's why we have to be very aware when we're trying to research, when we're trying to find out. The news feeds that we get online are engineered to feed our own bias. They're not engineered to teach us anything. And so that's why we need to be very conscious of educating ourselves. And I think that all ties back to curating our own research. It's interesting to me, for an example, do research on Facebook that you've left open, and then go to a completely different search engine, type in the same terms in a search engine that hasn't been open, that you refresh the window and clear out the history. And it's interesting how different the material is that you're going to be shown. So anyway, but it is fascinating to me how that exercise, what you guys came up with, are really solid examples of exactly the kinds of things that I was hoping for. So, you know, excellent work. That is absolutely great.
And while we were discussing like all of the different things that we came up with, there's one thing I did notice is that like all of the works that were in a positive light were more often than not like larger than life, or like something that you needed to step back to actually take in. And I think that's like a really powerful message about like what kind of work that is, if that makes, in comparison to any work like made to spread hate or anything.
I think that's a really interesting point, because the examples you guys chose are things that you really do need to step back, and I love that metaphor. I think it's wonderful. Just like what you were saying, Diana, earlier about the house episode, you were self-editing and saying essentially that you had to step back, and you started immediately considering, well, look, consider the time that they were put in. You were finding as many excuses as you could not to be angry with the people who had developed that episode, which I thought was really interesting. And I think all of you do that, and I think it says something very much about your own character as an artist. That's what you're dealing with, and I think that's when I see that, it gives me hope. I think that's wonderful. Well, that is pretty much everything that I wanted to cover today. We talked about the upcoming module and thing. And one thing I wanted also to impress on everyone is that the due dates are and remain flexible. They're there to help you keep moving forward, and we will adjust them as we need to. And I really appreciate everybody that said, by the way, you didn't, this wasn't published on Canvas all the way, because that you guys kind of saved my backside. So I appreciate that. Thank you. When you have questions, email me and let me know so that I can respond and take care of it. Now, there are a couple of students who joined us a little bit late, who finished up their ad, or what's it called? They were able to add the class, or they got in because the wait list, because of other people dropping it. And for anybody who feels like they're a little bit behind, just do the best you can. Keep me in the loop and let me know what's going on. When people have communicated with me, I have never been a jerk about late assignments or anything. I mean, I'm always really flexible with that as well. The only exception is, and I think I told you guys about this, is after COVID, about 2 months after the end of one of the terms, I got a couple emails from a few students that were enraged that because they said that they thought it was UVU policy to give everybody A's during classes that they no longer attended if they knew somebody who caught COVID. And I thought, that is the oddest thing I've ever heard. But 2 months after the end of the semester, there's not an awful lot I can do. Compare that to a friend of mine who both of his parents were really sick with COVID during the term. He was doing the best he could, but he was really far behind. And he said, I think I'm just going to have to fail this semester and take it again. And he and I were able to talk about what he had done. And he finally realized that he'd been doing the stuff all along during the term. He just hadn't turned the stuff in because he was too busy with his parents. So he turned everything in, and his grade went from a D to an A- within a matter of a couple of weeks. So that's a big difference between lack of communication and letting me know what's going on. I'm happy to help. Whatever it takes to, as much as I can do to help you guys to succeed out of this class, I will do as much as I possibly can to help. So feel free to ask questions about assignments, things like that. Before you email me with a question, please make sure that you read everything. And I'm not talking to you guys here necessarily. I'm talking to everybody in the class who watches this. Read all the material and read it in the sequence that it's given. And then when you have questions, you'll be able to articulate them in such a way that it can help everybody in the class. So, and then I will talk about those questions during the next, I was going to say episode, during our next podcast, when we get back together again next week. Thank you again for the four of you who were able to submit into the discussion for the discussion on inclusion. Everybody else, I want you to watch this. Hopefully that'll give you good solid ideas, and then over the next week, do everything you need to submit into that discussion as well, so we can respond to each other, or at least learn from each other. All right, well, thank you very much. Does anybody have any final questions? All right, excellent. Thank you very much, Abby, Paula, and Diana. And I hope to see you and everybody else next week. Hope everybody has a wonderful weekend. All righty?
Thank you, you too. Bye-bye.
All right, we'll see you later.